Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Trollhunters, Tales of Arcadia. It's been a while since we've talked about Trollhunters, Tales of Arcadia, and there's a good reason for that. We did something for Owls instead for Halloween. So if you guys didn't see that playlist yet, I'm currently in the process of fixing it, but yeah, you guys can go check that out. I would very much appreciate it if you did. But in any case, this episode is essentially Jim returning from the Darklands. It is called Homecoming, and that for a good reason. It's just Jim finally getting out of the Darklands and returning home, which was a thread for the first several episodes of this season. So kind of important, but in any case, this episode is fun because it's, well, first and foremost, this episode's very confusing. There's a lot of, story-related things that go on in this episode. Essentially, it's in keeping with how the previous episode ended. This episode is set up into 3 parts that eventually converge into one. But in any case, we're going to kind of get into that. I'm not entirely sure how to start this review, but I'm gonna start with Jim's section, since that's where they actually open with him. But yeah, the episode does open up with Jim being unfortunately forced to fight Nomura, and Gunmar watches the whole thing from his throne and proceeds to tell them that if the changeling can't break his armor, then her death most surely will. At which point he forces the two, both Nomura and Jim, to fight. And of course, Jim is insistent that he doesn't want to fight Nomura, and proceeding to but while Nomura proceeds to respond that he may not be able to, but she has to. At which point the two of them then proceed to fight. At which point Jim, throughout their fight, first and foremost, Jim slowly starts losing his weapons because obviously his will is weakening since he's been in here. That's been a recurring thing throughout these past couple of episodes. But yeah, Jim's will is weakening, so he's slowly losing weapons and is slowly losing the ability to fight. But in the process, he tries to plead with Nomura to stop fighting, pointing out that he's seen his friends. He knows his friends are here, and he knows there's a way out and that they can escape. But Nomura is insistent that no, they can't escape, pointing out that there is no home to go back to. They are not going to be able to, get out. But in any case, they proceed to fight while Gunmar watches and is pleased to discover that Jim's will is weakening, and that soon he'll be able to take Jim for himself using the Decimar blade. But of course, meanwhile, Toby and Claire are still stuck in a cage from the previous episode, and they're trying to figure out their way out. And they start by trying to, they start by trying to tackle the gate to get it open, but quickly discover that that's a bad idea because the gate is designed in a way where you can't get out and it'll electrocute you if you try. So unfortunately they're trying to figure out how they're supposed to get out, and of course Toby is annoyed because they're supposed to be the rescue party and they're supposed to save Jim, but meanwhile they discover that Noam Chomsky can actually get out, which of course causes them to realize what Kanjigar said about how Noam Chomsky would be their guide and more, and he would likely be able to get them out that way. And of course it's at this point where Claire proceeds to scoop up Noam Chomsky and tries to shove him into the keyhole. And of course Noam Chomsky is very, very visibly does not want to, but Claire tells him that if it works, he'll wind up forgiving her. At which point he winds up climbing into the hole and winds up opening the gate from the inside, which of course everybody's surprised worked, and of course realizing now that they're free, they need to go and find Jim and find a way to rescue him. So they proceed to go off and go find him. But meanwhile, Arg and Blinky have been captured by Dictatious and his Gum horde, which And of course, Blinky is very visibly confused as to how Dictatious can be here, pointing out that he very much thought that Gunmar, he very much thought that Dictatious was dead, pointing out that he mourned him, and also admits that he keeps all of his books in his library as a keepsake. But of course, Dictatious points out that that it was a bit of a foolish notion, pointing out that he's essentially just been in the Darklands this entire time, and he's fine. And he does admit that since he's come to see the way of Gunmar and has decided to help him in his quest to reshape the world. But and of course Blinky is insistent that this isn't his brother talking and believes that Decimar Blade has in fact controlled him. But Dictatious reveals that no, it is not the blade, and he admits that he knows fully well what he's doing. He admits that he did side with Gunmar of his own free will, and believes that what Gunmar is doing will ultimately be for the good of all troll kinds. But of course, Blinky is upset to hear this, pointing out that he did idolize his brother, and admits that he's very sad that his brother has fallen down a dark path and lost his way. But of course, Dictatious doesn't really entertain that thought very long, and then proceeds to point out that he has a far more pressing matter. He points out that if Blinky got in, that the bridge must be somewhere in the town nearby. But and of course, he admits that he'll be more than happy to make Blinky talk if he's not willing to. But Blinky is insistent he will not tell him where the bridge is, and what then proceeds to follow is a series of Dictatious beating the shit out of his brother while he's tied up and chained up, and while Blinky just kind of insults him very openly and makes a lot of snarky one-liners toward him. But of course, Dictatious is frustrated about the fact that Blinky won't tell him where the gate is. But of course, throughout all of this, we do find out that eventually that Blinky is in no real way never going to tell him, pointing out that while he does idolize his brother and admits that he's upset that his brother's fallen down a dark path, he will never give in and tell him about where the bridge is. But Dictatious then realizes that Blinky already told him where the bridge is. As we find out during this entire sequence, Blinky he admits that Dictatious admits that while Blinky didn't actually tell him where the bridge is, he did know that Blinky, throughout this entire sequence and the types of words he uses to insult his brother, does ultimately figure out that Blinky's choice of words was ultimately what gave them away, and after doing a bit of deductive work, then concludes that the bridge is most likely somewhere in a woodland clearing in Arcadia, and realizing that now he knows exactly how to actually free Gunmar. He then sends one of the Gum-Gums to go and find where that location coincides in the Darklands, so that they can find it, so that they can go free Gunmar and tell him where the bridge is. While Dictatious is talking with one of the soldiers, Blinky then proceeds to note that his spear, that's his flare crystal, has landed right next to where they're tied up, and realizing he can very much turn the tide to his favor. It's at this point where Dictatious picks up his Parallax spear and is prepared to stare at Blinky with it, pointing out that now he's served his purpose and is no longer needed. But Blinky instead moves out of the way of the chain, uses the chain to breaks his chain with the Parallax spear. At which point he picks up his flare crystal and permanently blinds Dictatious. From this point onward, Dictatious cannot see. And of course Dictatious is very visibly angry, pointing out that now his 6 eyes no longer work, which is very unfortunate, because if you got 6 eyes, you're probably expecting to be able to see really good. But it's at this point where Blinky then proceeds to pick up Dictatious' Parallax spear while he's reeling, and proceeds to knock him out, while also emphasizing the dick part of his name. Because Dictatious is kind of a dick. It makes sense. But in any case, now using the staff to also free Arg, and then conclude that now that they dealt with Dictatious, they're going to need to find their friend. Meanwhile, they proceed to run off and go do that. Meanwhile, Claire and Toby are currently very much turned around because they don't have any idea of where they're supposed to go in regards of how to find Jim, but they can hear him. They can hear him, and otherwise have no idea where he's supposed to be. So they of course they eventually lean up against this weird skull alcove thing where where of course Toby admits that he used to like mazes but not anymore. At which point he leans up against it and in the process accidentally moves something that he admits he didn't mean to move. And it's at this point where it opens up and reveals an alternate entrance into the it reveals a giant entrance into the arena where of course where Nomura and Jim are fighting. And Nomura, after repeated attempts for Jim to get through him, does not believe him until she sees his friends suddenly appear. And realizing Jim isn't as crazy as she thought he was, she then realizes that there is in fact now realizes that Jim was right and there is a way to get out. But and of course Toby and Claire are happy to see Jim. But then Toby realizes that they're not alone and quickly realizes that that's not just Jim that's there. At which point they see Gunmar, and Gunmar, upon seeing two humans in the Darklands, realizes that the bridge is likely open and that they can find a way, and then he now knows that he can get out. And it's at this point where he rallies his troops to immediately get ready to storm the Darklands and immediately, assembles his team to kind of also capture his prisoners who are now trying to escape. And realizing they really need to get out, they proceed to look around. But of course Toby is very visibly confused because well, first and foremost, they figure out a way to actually get the door open. They realize that the crank that's what is it? Kanjigar gave to Claire is actually supposed to open the gate to get open, but they realize that they need time. So Nomura, seeing a cage that has a stockling stuck in it because Gunmar threw it in there, or is implied to have thrown it in there, then realizes that she knows a way to actually buy some time. At which point she sets the stockling loose and starts attacking people. And realizing that his troops are getting massacred, but unfortunately getting massacred by a stockling, Gunmar immediately uses his throne to charge himself up, and then immediately goes to deal with the stockling personally. And meanwhile, but unfortunately, he's too late to actually stop everybody from escaping, and immediately leads his troops to go and find Nomura, Jim, and everybody else. So he immediately goes off to go find that. And meanwhile, we also see a cutaway of Drawl. Standing outside. We see several cutaways, but we see him standing outside of the bridge, keeping guard like he's supposed to, but becomes increasingly anxious when he realizes his friends aren't coming out. He's realizing something isn't right, and is realizing he's going to have to make a choice. He is going to have to make the choice his father mentioned. But in case meanwhile, Blinky and Arg are kind of playing a little bit of catch up with the rest of the group. They're kind of trying to find their way there, but they discover the arena where Gunmar was most likely held, and Arg does note that's the dead stockling. And does note that it was most likely Gunmar, since he knows that nobody else would most likely be able to have the brute strength to do that. So, realizing they need to hurry and find their friends, they quickly start working their way through the rest of the Darklands, where they also discover Jim's cave hidey hole thing that he made while he was in the Darklands, and quickly discover that Jim had drawn portraits of them to kind of remind himself of them. Which, of course, makes Arg and Blinky really sad, but they also note that, it may be, and Blinky, of course, suggests that it may be a better idea to go and find, what is it? They suggest that it may be a better idea to go and rendezvous with the bridge, but, Arg, seeing the picture that Jim made of them, concludes that they should probably find their friends first, and, Blinky decides that that's probably a better idea, and they decide to go and continue searching for their friends. Meanwhile, thanks to Nomura's help, they are able to continue escaping through the Darklands, but unfortunately have to pass across a chasm to get where they need to go. And of course, Toby is very visibly concerned because that Nomura is coming with them, because as he points out to Jim, I should mention, he points out that Kanjigar said that Jim had to be alone, which of course causes Jim to do a double take and wonder what exactly it is that Toby's talking about. But It's at this point where Nomura admits that she overhears Toby and admits that the feeling is mutual, meaning that she never really liked Toby. At which point she realizes that they need to find a way to cross the chasm that they need to cross, pointing out that it's a dead end, and quickly realize that the best way to do that is to use one of the chains that Gunmar has slung up to kind of mark his territory. And at this point where Nomura uses one of her remaining sword to cut it down. And pulls it apart and pulls it down, and they proceed to use it for a rope swing with Claire and Jim going first, which results in a very humorous thing where Jim unfortunately does not watch his hands, as we find out, and Jim admits that he probably should have that probably could have gone better because now Claire's mad at him, but in case at this point where Nomura then proceeds to tie the chain around Toby's waist, but Toby admitting that it's a little tight and wishes it weren't as tight, so Nomura adjusts it, but also admits again that she still doesn't like Toby very much. At which point she asks him if there's anything else she can do for him, and admits that that's fine. At which point she proceeds to kick him across the gorge with the chain, swinging him across. But unfortunately he does not reach. Even though Jim and Claire do instruct him to use his legs and pump like it's a kiddie swing, and of course Toby has no idea what he's doing. He just visibly has no idea. And eventually Nomura realizes that they're not going to have time to wait for Toby to kind of successfully figure out how to swing across, because she sees Gunmar's Gum's shoulders, and immediately realizes the best way to do this is just grab the chain and just swing across. So they do that, at which point they continue to run, but they run into yet another problem. They are now surrounded by goblins, who are all swarming, and quickly realizing that there's way too many to fight, they immediately decide to run while also fighting off goblin after goblin. And eventually they are unfortunately led to a cliff, where Jim finally realizes that they were being led to something, with Nomura commenting that it's not something, but someone. At which point, Gunmar appears as the leader of the goblin horde, and he then proceeds to pull out his sword and get ready to fight. Well, Nomura decides to hold off Gunmar, pointing out that he's been toying with children long enough, and demands that he fight a member of his own kind. Which Gunmar then proceeds to insist she is not his own kind. At which point that he calls her an impure, and they proceed to fight. And of course Nomura does hold her own against Gunmar for a bit, but eventually Gunmar does wind up knocking her into a wall. And concluding that she's not worthy of his blade, he then proceeds to pick up a rock and throw it at her, which results in her leg being broken. And Jim, angry that Gunmar hurt Nomura, then proceeds to charge him with his weapon. But because Jim's will is weakening, unfortunately he doesn't have his full power, and Gunmar is very easily able to overpower him. But fortunately, Jim still has his helmet, which as we find out, it was designed to protect him against the Decimar blade. It is designed to keep Gunmar from being able to hypnotize him and put him under his control. But Gunmar admits that that's not going to work. That's not going to work for long, and eventually Jim's will is going to fade, and he is eventually going to be able to break through Jim's armor. And sure enough, Toby and Claire do, in the process, also proceed to rescue Nomura, with Claire noting that Nomura's leg is broken, whereas Nomura just sarcastically remarks, "Yeah, you think?" But of course, Gunmar does wind up being right about Jim's will weakening, because eventually he is able to break Jim's armor and is eventually able to get past his helmet, and does start mind controlling him with the Decimar blade, which is exactly when Blinky and Arg show up. And of course, Blinky realizes they need to find a way to quickly get down there, but doesn't immediately see an immediately accessible route. At which point, Arg just jumps down there, no hesitation. And while Blinky still hesitates and realizes he's not quite as fearless as his friend, and realizes he needs to find another way down. So he does that. But in any case, it's this point where Arg and Gunmar then proceed to fight, and Gunmar is surprised to see Arg and calls him a traitor. At which point the two proceed to fight, and in the process Arg winds up getting knocked into a wall, which he discovers is very loose. But he then quickly he then proceeds to fight with Gunmar, with Gunmar then insisting that Arg has lost his way, and that he's more than happy to use his sword to help remake Arg and remind him of who he used to be. But Arg admits that Arg refuses and tells him that he's not that person anymore. At which point the two proceed to fight and I get more and of course Gunmar then proceeds to insist that Arg has no real choice, pointing out that it's either he gets remade by his blade or he dies. But it's at this point where Arg just remarks, "Been there, done that." At which point he just flings Gunmar into a wall and Gunmar gets buried, buying his friends enough time to escape. And of course, Arg then proceeds to lead his friends out, and they proceed to clamber out, to continue to clamber out of the Darklands and try to escape. And quickly realizing, with Noam Chomsky kind of leading the way, they realize that the best way to do that is to just follow Noam Chomsky to where the exit is. Ultimately, we find out that Dictatious does return with some Gum soldiers, and tells Gunmar that they figured out a way out of the Darklands, and that they need to rally the troops. But when Gunmar fully recovers from the fact that he got a bunch of rocks dumped on him, he admits that he doesn't have time to wait for them to rally the troops, telling them that they need to go now. At which point they proceed to just leave. But in case, again, we see that Droll is once again increasingly anxious about the fact that his friends are getting out, pointing out that time is in fact running out. But and of course, it is at this point where he then proceeds to wonder whether or not he should go in after them. And because he was asked to guard, but he is wondering if maybe he should go in after him, pointing out that it's taking them a lot longer than it should. So in any case, it is at this point where with the group reunited, they start climbing up a cliff to get to where the bridge is. But in the process, they discover that Nomura has to be carried because her leg is broken. But and of course, it is at this point where they quickly discover that Nomura has actually accidentally lost her grip and is about to fall. And they quickly realize that they need to find a way to help her and get her out. But with Jim admitting that he's not leaving her behind because they're all getting out. But of course, they then discover that the Gundams are actually swarming the cliffside, and realizing that her friends are now in danger. Nomura admits that it was a nice thought, but admits that then tells Jim that she'll hold off as many of them as they can. At which point, she proceeds to let go of Jim's hand, and then proceeds to fly, and proceeds to go and try and fight off against the Gum soldiers, while Jim is unfortunately dragged the rest of the way and stopped by his friends from jumping after her. So, unfortunately, Jim now has to leave Nomura behind because he really has no other choice. But it's at this point where they are surrounded by Gum soldiers, and realizing they are in fact not going to be able to get back to the bridge after all. They realize that they're going to need to fight, but then realize they don't have to, because it's at this point where Droll shows up in the Gyre, and he proceeds to tell everybody that he's finally made the choice his father had asked him to make, pointing out that he's chosen to save his friends rather than let them just die inside the bridge. But ultimately, he proceeds to pull them all into the Gyre, while Jim tells them that there's one more and that she's coming with them. At which point, Droll immediately realizes he's talking about Nomura and goes back to go get her, using the Gyre to pull her inside, and they proceed to race past and go and make their way to the bridge. But quickly discovers that a Nyarlathotep is actually guarding the way, and realizing that they're not going to, and of course realizing they're not going to be able to get through. It's at this point where Droll proceeds to put the Gyre in high gear, pointing out that he hopes it hurts. At which point they proceed to drive the Gyre through the Nyarlathotep's intestinal tract and blow a big hole in it, which of course enables them to get out of the Darklands, as the power winds up running out on the amulet, and the bridge winds up closing behind them. And of course, everybody climbs out of the Gyre and celebrates about the fact that they're now that they managed to get out all safe and sound. Well, of course, we find out that Toby and Blinky are holding each other, with Blinky hoping that regardless of what happens, he knows that he never wants to go anywhere near that bridge again. And of course, Arg decides to honor those wishes by smashing the bridge with his bare hands. At which point now happy that the bridge has been destroyed. You now celebrate about the fact that they finally got their troll hunter back. They're happy about the fact that they managed to save him. Well, and of course, Jim is currently just taking in the scenery because he has been in the Darklands so long that he's forgotten of what Arcadia is like. So he's just very happy to be home and is over the moon about the fact that he's returned. Well, of course, Nomura. We do find out that yes, it is confirmed that Nomura and Joel had some sort of relationship. And because it does finally confirm that they were in fact a couple at one point, because after Droll saves her, she takes his hand and they decide to properly rekindle what they had. It's not stated, but it is implied by their body language. But in case meanwhile Jim is very visibly excited, and it's at this point where Blinky then proceeds to retrieve the Amulet of Daylight from the bridge and hands it back to Jim, pointing out that it belongs to him. At which point, Jim proceeds to replace it in his chest plate, and his armor turns from the usual red, from the blood red that it had been when he was wearing the Eclipse armor, to the usual blue that the Daylight armor usually is. And now being fully revitalized and now having his armor back, his armor properly fully restored, he proceeds to climb up onto a rock and takes in the fresh air, with Claire ultimately joining them, and they proceed to share their first proper kiss, which is great. But of course, Jim proceeds to remark that he missed her, at which point she remarks back that he's missed a couple of showers, which of course he does realize that he probably does need to shower a bit because he's a little bit smelly. But in case, Toby is very happy because they finally gotten and of course, Droll and Nomura do comment on the fact that Jim and Claire have kissed, pointing out that it's seemingly a very barbaric custom. But of course, Toby is very happy about the fact about what they just did, but then realize that the Troll Tribunal is most likely going to be pissed when they find out, because obviously they went into the Darklands, assembled the bridge, all things that they did against the Tribunal's orders, and broke it and revived Org, did a whole bunch of things they probably shouldn't have. But of course, Blinky points out that he doesn't really care, admitting that they've got their troll hunter back, and he's just happy to have Jim back. So in case with that, they then realize that they'll probably have to just deal with it when they get to it. So in case, with everybody having properly been reunited, they then proceed to Jim's team then proceeds to bring him home, and Jim is about to knock on the door when his mother suddenly pulls it open, and Barbara admits that she's wondering where he's been, pointing out that he was supposed to call an hour ago. But and of course, it's at this point where Jim just proceeds to pull his mother into a fierce hug, just telling her that he's just happy to be home. Which of course she doesn't fully understand. She admits that it was only one time, and admits that as long as he never does it again, it'll be fine. But is also just decides to return the hug, pointing out that she doesn't know why her son's so clingy, but she's not complaining. But and at which point, the episode then proceeds to end by following a leaf that flutters past the door of Jim's house, and then into the woods where the bridge was rebuilt, and it lands in a footprint, where we then proceed to see Gunmar marching away. So yeah, that's how the episode ends. So first things first, this episode culminates in a lot of things. So obviously a lot of this rescue attempt ultimately resulted in Gunmar getting out. So, and none of the crew know this yet. They will eventually figure this out. But yeah, Gunmar escapes because unfortunately they did not follow Kanjigar's orders to the letter. Unfortunately, Toby did not fulfill his promise to make sure that only Jim got out, because they ultimately wound up rescuing Nomura as well, which of course is a thing. But also, Droll left his post to go save his friends, so he did not actually come in to actually defend he did not actually stand guard and keep Gunmar from getting out. He just went in after his friends, and I don't blame him for that. Obviously, going in to rescue your friend is kind of more important, but I do not blame him in the slightest for that. But I don't blame anybody in the slightest for what happened. Obviously, Toby was very adamant about the fact that, yeah, we can't rescue Nomura. She needs to stay in the Darklands. But No. In the end, they were able to rescue Jim and a new friend, but in the process, unfortunately, Gunmar did get out. And honestly, that is not entirely their fault. As established, they would have gotten Jim out almost immediately if the Troll Tribunal hadn't intervened and decided to destroy the bridge while Jim was in the process of getting out of it. If they had waited just a few more seconds and wouldn't have been afraid of Gunmar, they wouldn't have had to have pulled this whole rescue attempt, and Gunmar wouldn't have gotten out. He would have been in a vault. He would have been dealt with. It would have been fine. But instead, no. He gets out. He winds up getting out, and is now going to be the big bad for the rest of the series, because now he's finally free and is able to continue his quest to bring about the Eternal Night. So unfortunately, that's how the episode ends, and that is what the rest of the series is going to be. So yeah, but in case that is going to do it for my review of Trollhunters. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Also, be sure to follow me on Discord. Well, obviously, go check out my Patreon if you want to help support me. I would appreciate that. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does help me out, so please go check that out. Again, link is down in the description. Please go check that out. And also, be sure to go check out my Twitch. I stream Saturdays and Sundays over Player. Please go check those out. I'm trying to get it set up because Twitch now allows cross-platform streaming now. So I'm gonna try and figure out if I can get that set up. I'm gonna do my best, but I need to figure out how to do that. But I'll probably work on that. Well, at some point, I need to work on that. But yeah, I will definitely be doing that. So if all goes to plan, you will probably start seeing streams over here as well. I need to fiddle with it because it's very finicky how Twitch has it set up for cross-platform streaming. But I'll get it fixed. I'll work on that, hopefully. But yeah. In case, also be sure and go and check out, I guess, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this video. Whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new, or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both those videos out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!